Hello, welcome back to online class. Last class we discussed about the significant marks of discipleship. There we see imitating Christ, following Christ, submissions, self-deniers, and being conformed in the image of Christ. Now, in this class, we are going to discuss on the topic creating disciple-making environment. We are called to create a good environment, a kind of like disciple-making environment. So how can we create or how can we make a disciple-making environment? That should be our main subject for today class. So we are called to make disciples of all nations. Therefore we need to make disciples. Therefore this is our duty and our call to make disciples, and we also need to create environment of discipleship, or we need to create a disciple-making environment, because environment is very important. With a good environment, people can grow in the likeness of Christ, and discipleship also will be growing in a good environment. So the first question we need to think of in our mind is, can disciples grow in any environment? In some special case, the answer is yes. But the possibilities is very less. If we lived in very bad environment, we can become bad. But we live in good environment, we can be good and we can prove ourselves. That is the natural way. So it opens door. So good environment opens door more widely for discipleships. So the questions that I said, can disciples grow in any environment? In some special case, yes, a disciple can grow in any environment, but we have very less opportunity. For example, Dietrich Bonhoeffer grew in prison and even inspired fellow prisoners and guards with his strength. Millions more have benefited from his letters and papers from prisons. So this is a good example. Even though his environment is not good, he is a faithful disciple of God. Therefore, he can help a lot of people and he can inspire people to follow Christ. Of course, people can also grow spiritually in spite of toxic family and churches. But here, we don't explore how Christians grow in spite of their environment. Instead, we will focus and look at the best environment for spiritual formations or growth. So before discussing vital elements for a healthy environment, let's see, sometimes we think that to grow or to train to be godly will be too much demanding. That means if we train ourselves to be good disciples, or if we train ourselves to be godly, we are afraid that we have to give up a lot of our freedoms and it will demand a lot of things. We think high demanding on this. Therefore, we don't commit ourselves to do or to create such a good environment, or we don't submit ourselves to be godly or a good disciple of Jesus. That's the reasons. But here the challenge is, without afraid of losing self-freedoms, without afraid of high demandings. Only by the love of God, let us commit ourselves to create a good environment, to create disciple-making environment. That's very important. In making good environment, the following 6 elements are very important, the vital elements for a healthy environment. Number 1, trust. Number 1, trust. We need to show our trustworthiness to our surrounding, to our friends, to our neighbors. And also in our side, we also need to seek friends who are trustworthy. This is mutual. So in making a good environment, trust is very important. So trust is based on integrity, personal integrity. You can't force people or you can't command people, you trust me. But you have to show your integrity or your good reputations. By looking at your character and your integrity, people will come to trust you. And we also can trust person who has proven reliable and honest, or their integrity. Trustworthy person provides you with a safe havens of open and honest acceptance. You can allow yourself to come under that person's influence. Trust is the key, because we only take the truth we trust. And that trust has to do with the messengers as much as the message. When you trust someone to the point you become vulnerable, you're giving the person permission to speak to your life. This is where transformational traction takes place. You are starting to make progress. So choose carefully, because the other person's character will help you shape yours. Look for someone whose action reflect his word, someone whose character you admire, someone with good reputations. For confidentiality. And if you can't find such a person, pray to God faithfully. Relationship of trust provide the foundation for transformational discipleship. Relationship of trust provide the foundation for transformational discipleship. Only in trusting relationship we can honestly deal with barriers to obedience and overwhelming sins that holds us back from spiritual growth. The result will be what Jesus said. The result will be like what Jesus said. Jesus describes, when a student is fully taught, he will be like his teacher. Luke chapter 6 verse 40. So here in brief, the point is, it has mutual relationship. We must prove our trustworthiness or integrity to others, so that people can trust us, and then people can cooperate with us for making a good environment and for the growth, for the spiritual growth. That is one side. And we also need to seek a person who is trustworthy, and we can make a trust relationship that will make grow our discipleships, and that will make a good environment, that will create a disciple-making environment. So the second element is grace. Another element needed for us to flourish as disciples is grace. Grace means treating others better than they deserve to be treated. Grace means treating others better than they deserve to be treated. It means God treats us God treats us all much better than we deserve to be treated. When we work to create an environment of grace, we produce a culture of acceptance in which people see the value and good in others. We definitely don't ignore the sins, the faults, and the problems of others. In fact, we can handle those issues better in an environment of grace. When we offer people a place where they feel safe, affirmed, and more able to risk, they will be more open to change. So, because of grace, discipleship will work as we make ourselves. Because of grace, discipleship will work as we make ourselves available for transformations. So, grace means we need to treat others more than or better than they deserve to be treated, because God also treats us more than we deserve to be treated. That doesn't mean that we allowed sins. It doesn't mean that we allow sins and we just forgive their sins. No, but we show the grace, the mercy, so that through that love and grace, they can change themselves. Or in other words, the love of God, the grace of God will change their life. We allowed the love of God and the grace of God to transform the life of people. That will create a disciple-making environment. And the third point is humility. Humility. Christ's primarily character trait is ground zero for personal transformations. Without humility, Christ wouldn't have submitted himself to the Father or make the sacrifice of his own life for the whole world, for the salvation of all humanity. One reason even the very best discipleship plans doesn't result in transformations is that they don't start with humility. Humility forms the environments and relationships that make transformation possible. We can define humility in several ways. Peter wrote that God opposes the proud, and he said, humble yourself therefore under God's mighty hands, that he may lift you up in due times. We can see 1 Peter chapter 5 verse 6. Just as humility is Jesus' primary character traits, it should be the foundations we build on as we seek to follow him and be formed into his image. Think of it this way: without humility, there is no submission. Without submissions, there is no relationship of trust can't be exist. Without a relationship of trust, we won't make ourselves vulnerable. Without vulnerability, no one can influence us, and without influence, we won't change. So, the third element is humility. With humility, we create environment of disciples making. When people see at us our humility, our heart, they will come to be associated with us, and then we have chance to influence them, to impart the spiritual life, to impart the teaching of Jesus in their life, so that we can influence them and lead them and help them, and we can shape them into a spiritual life. The fourth point is submissions. Jesus' humility allowed him to divest himself of the rights and privileges of deity, and he submitted himself to the will of God the Father, and he followed the agendas of God the Father. Submission is a love word before it is an authority word. That means submission is a word connected to love, because we submit to the person we love. We submit ourselves out of love. It's not a word connected to authority. We don't submit because we fear, but we submit ourselves because we love. So the word is closely associated with love, not connected with authority. So in other words, we can say submission is a love word before it is an authority word. You submit to others because you desire to enter into a relationship that benefits you and those around you. Submission doesn't involve some keeping you in line, but allows someone to help you keep your commitment to God. Submission means saying, I choose to let others love me. Submission means I choose to let others love me. Without submission, we can face three negative outcomes. Number one, your needs won't be met. Our needs won't be met. Number two, you can't practice humility. We can't practice humility, the character trait that allow you to submit. Number three, you shut out others from loving you. We shut out others from loving us, or we hinders others to love us, or we hinders ourselves from the love of others. When you submit to others and invite them to join you on the journey, your needs will be met, and you will practice humility, and others will be able to love you. This makes you a growing disciple who then influence others with Christ-like character. Nothing could be more radical or countercultural than Christians who submit to other people's needs. This is the key place where churches and ministries today should invest their energy. So when we submit, our needs is met, and we can practice humilities, and others will be able to love us, or we open doors for we open doors to others to love us. The final element is affirmations. We all need affirmation. Without it, some ugly things happens in our lives. Affirmation confirms our identities. The last element is affirmation or appreciation. We all need affirmation or appreciation. Without it, some ugly things happen in our lives. Affirmation confirms our identities. We hear that others appreciate our strengths and contribution. We risk coming out of ourselves. When we hear the others appreciate our strengths and our contributions, it motivates our hearts and our minds to do more for God, to do more for God's ministry. When others don't affirm us, we begin to affirm ourselves. If no one pays attention to us, we start giving attention. Paul, highly passionate man who loved and hated with great force and sensed Timothy's needs, and began his second letter to him this powerful affirmation. This is the affirmation of Paul to Timothy. I thank God for you. I pray for you day and night. I think about you all the time. I remember your tears. I long to see you. I am filled with joy when I am around you. We can see in 2 Timothy chapter 1 verses 3 to 4. This affirmation is very powerful. It creates environments that gives people permission to drop their defense and allows deep change to take place. When we receive praise and appreciation, we want to do better. When a brother or sister in the faith affirms us, we don't want to become consistent. Instead, we feel humble that God thinks so much of us that He sends one of His children to affirm us. The messenger is almost as good as a dove descending and a voice from heaven saying, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." For that reason, we want to make an even greater effort. Affirmation becomes a way of life in an environment of grace. It reminds people that God values them. This is more than theology, it's the truth they experience. Affirmation allows people to be broken before God and to deal with unconfessed sin, shame, and the other inner life issues that destroy our good effort at discipleship. When we receive praise and appreciation, we want to do better. When a brother or sister in the faith affirms us, we don't want to become consistent. Instead, we feel humble that God thinks so much of us that He sends one of His children to affirm us. The messenger is almost as good as a dove descending and a voice from heaven saying, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." For that reason, we want to make an even greater effort. Affirmation becomes a way of life in an environment of grace. It reminds people that God values them. This is more than theology, it's the truth they experience. Affirmation allows people to be broken before God and to deal with unconfessed sin, shame, and the other inner life issues that destroy our good effort at discipleship. So, trust, grace, humility, submissions, affirmations, these foundational and essential elements create a good environment or disciple-making community. In opposite, suspicions, criticism, pride, self-will, and competitions, these caustic and damaging qualities destroy community. Every community includes all of these, both good and bad. So we must decide which one we will follow, the good characters or the bad characters. So each of us must decide the following. Should I endeavor to live as a person of trust, grace, humility, submission, and affirmation? Will I be one of the example of these traits of Christ to others so that we can create the kind of community in which disciples can grow? So we discussed that in making a healthy environment or environment of disciple making, we need to commit ourselves in the work of creating this disciple making community. So first of all, we need to prove our trustworthiness, and we need to give grace to others as we receive the grace of God. And we need to prove our humility, the life of humility. And we need to give our effort and submission to the work of God and to create the environment of disciple making. And finally, we must appreciate our fellow disciples, and we must love to give affirmation to others. We must love to give affirmation to others, disciples or other Christians. In this way, we can create a community, we can create an environment of disciple making. Here, I believe we all learned some lessons from this class. Now we stop our class here and see you in next class. See you in next class. God bless you all. Thank you.